Glad to welcome you to the Process Optimization course. First class today. And today we will talk about what in fact is the optimization of these very processes. I'll start with an anecdote that's also about optimization. We're going to have a lot of interesting case studies today. We're going to be talking from the optimization world. So the anecdote is like this, very topical, it's coming soon. At the market, the watermelon vendor has a sign, 1 watermelon, 30 rubles, 3 watermelons, 100 rubles. Buyer, give me 1 watermelon, pays 30 rubles, takes the watermelon. Repeating so 2 more times, after which he tells the salesman, I bought 3 watermelons from you for 90 rubles, even though it says you're selling them for 100. How stupid are you? After the customer leaves, the salesperson notices, and that's how they take the watermelon patri every time and teach me how to trade. It's very simple in such a humorous way about process optimization. It's about how you can add value to a business through how something can be changed in that very business. Why would anyone want to learn how to optimize processes in the first place? The fact is that the one who knows how to optimize business processes and knows how to increase business value is usually worth more on the market. That is, these people are more in demand. Because any business, it has a vested interest in making things better. This course has a website, so here it is. And in case we haven't met someone yet, my name is Mike Pritula. Here's a list of companies I've worked for. There have been a few times when I've had to optimize processes. For the most part, these were HR processes. The most so ambitious, and one of my very first projects was at Starlight Media, although participated in optimization even in Alpha Bank in processes, but my most standalone Starlight, when I needed to upgrade my recruiting process a lot more because it was previously very inefficient, there was a lot of expenditure of resources and in their cotton is minimal. Therefore, I am familiar with the subject matter of the process. Basically, every time I got some inefficient process, only by describing it, analyzing some things, changing, removing before the works, automating, only then I got a good result. How to improve the process without systematization most often fails. Relying on global best practices to get the job done? Here's a list. And I will be glad if you can also write a little about yourself, city, position of the company. Who's watching on Facebook, you can post in the comments there too. Once you've written, I'd be happy to read and introduce you to the other participants. So please, actually, I wonder who is watching the class about optimization, who is interested in the topic, for whom it's relevant. As you write, I will tell you about homework assignments. They allow you to get your diploma. That is, all completed homework in this course allow you to get our diploma, which can then be added to LinkedIn anywhere you want to print. Now that's a testament to your professionalism. Our course program consists of 8 sessions. Today we are introduced to the topic as a whole. In the second session, we will be introduced to the basic concepts of process improvement. In the third session, we will learn how to do process mapping. On the fourth, we'll explore how to improve processes. On the fifth, let's talk about architecture. On the sixth and seventh, we're going to look at a huge variety of tools, process optimization, so there are ready-made models, approaches. And in session 8, we're going to talk about building a company process culture. Okay, Katya, love company. Katya, what is your position? Also, please write it down. Here you go. In today's lesson, we will talk about what a process is, what characteristics a process has. We'll break down the different types of processes. We will talk about what is process improvement, what is the benefit of process improvement for the company, why the company should be interested in this. That's the plan for today. So let me start by saying that, in general, every company is engaged in one or another process optimization, sometimes without even thinking or guessing about it. However, if a company were to become aware of this, it could apply more advanced tools. I see you, Katya, Charlie. It's great that the chat is interested in such an important topic. There's a very popular model for improvement work in the world. It's called PDCA, an acronym for the 4 stages of business improvement. The 4 stages are called Plan, Do, Check, Act. PDCA. A huge number of businesses and a vast amount of managerial work are built on this model, and often people engage in it without even realizing it. What is it exactly? In the planning stage, we gather all kinds of data and think about what we want to achieve. Then we implement our plan, but we don't just implement it, we also observe what's actually happening, whether it's working or not, whether it's successful or not. We identify what went wrong, what can be improved, what can be optimized, make changes, and start the cycle again. This is the foundation for a huge amount of work in companies. Even a cycle like performance management or performance review essentially represents the PDCA model as well. That is, setting goals, implementing them, one-on-one meetings, monitoring, summarizing results, and developing a performance improvement plan and an employee development plan. So you could say that every company lives by this model. In other words, every company is engaged in this process in one way or another. The question is how consciously they do it, what tools they use, how they analyze them, and to what extent the company learns to apply these tools. So there you have it. That's the model in a nutshell. Now let's analyze an interesting case study. I promised we'd have a few examples today. Those who know these cases, please put a plus sign, but don't write the answer. For those who don't know this case, let's solve it together, thinking about how it could be resolved. So this is a real case from around the 1980s. Nike opened its factories in poor African countries. There is cheap labor there, and any company opens factories where labor is cheap. But they faced a problem. Everyone was stealing sneakers. The countries were poor, and people did not have shoes. As a result, entire villages were walking around in sneakers that cost more than a person's annual income. They were stealing not only for themselves, but also for their relatives and neighbors. And the solutions that could have been implemented were either very expensive or created even worse consequences, which ultimately ruled them out. For example, when they hired security, people started stealing even more after hiring security. Why? Because employees started taking even more sneakers to share with the security guards so they would let them pass. Bringing in security guards from the US is expensive. What other solution do you think there might be? Again, if you know the solution, put a plus sign. Who has read this case before? Those who have not encountered the solution before, please think about how the company could optimize the production process and prevent theft. Theft is a loss. One of the principles of optimization is the elimination of waste. So it is a pure optimization issue. Veronica, I see your plus sign. Well done. Any other guesses from the participants? Right, Veronica, if you know any other ideas besides how it was actually solved, please share those too. In other words, knowing how it was actually solved, maybe you can come up with another option, but not a copy of the original solution. Who is ready? Participate. Share your thoughts. Let us take 30 seconds to think, and then I will tell you how Nike optimized this production process and managed to eliminate losses from theft. All right, time is almost up. Well, friends, let us get acquainted with the solution. The solution was as follows. By the way, the company invited a consultant. After thinking for a while, the consultant said, well, since you have many factories in Africa, divide the production of sneakers. Produce left shoes in some factories and right shoes in others, then assemble them together at a separate warehouse and package them for sale. The company did just that. They started producing left and right shoes separately and then assembling them together in the US or Europe. That's how sneakers were made. I don't know if that's why or not, but a long time ago there were often problems with the left and right not being very identical, even in size. I think quality control has been able to eliminate that now, but I haven't run into that anymore. But when I did, let's move on. It's a case. Going further, so what is the process that companies want to optimize? It is a sequence of interrelated tasks or activities that consume one or more resources at each stage. It can be employee energy, time, infrastructure, machinery, and money in order to convert inputs into outputs. Now that's a complete and official definition of what the process is. Essentially, everything we do at work and even in life can be called a process. Are any cooking, any laundry, any ironing, going to the store? Basically, whatever you take, you can break down a process into its component parts and see how we execute it. And two, by the way, you can find options to optimize these processes. There are even whole systems for optimizing processes. Once upon a time, I heard such an optimization process. It's called Fly Lady. I've heard of it. I don't know how long it's been around. But what surprised me was that even such mundane processes are trying to be optimized. Importance. Processes define a specific sequence of work activities over time. First, the volume and well-defined inputs and outputs and serve as the fundamental building blocks of all organizations. That is, processes are like little Lego pieces from which you can build a constructor of processes. But the constructor can be assembled chaotically, it can be assembled not very efficiently, and it can be assembled some slender such system that will work. Very cool about the processes. I like this one from such famous materials. It's a McDonald's movie. If any of you have seen it, haven't seen it, check it out, by all means. I'm trying to remember the name now. Unfortunately, I probably won't remember. Anyone who remembers the name, please post it. It explains how McDonald's arrived at the current food preparation process. And we know their food cooks very quickly. I mean, even still, many companies that are in the same industry and the same business cannot issue orders that fast. Well, another ad campaign they ran ordering on McDrive in 45 seconds is also a result of optimization. It is all about optimization. So it is important for any business moving forward. Processes are all around us everywhere. Everything we do is a process. In every area, function of an organization, many processes are performed. That is, people work by processes, very often without realizing it themselves, and the processes are informal. These processes interact with other processes, and large and small organizations can be viewed as complex networks of interconnected processes. The success of an organization depends largely on how well it executes its processes, and an effective process is one that consequently and efficiently produces the intended results. That is what the processes are. And it is worth saying that the most successful companies in the world, they still work according to predetermined processes. These processes are analyzed, improved continuously, and the company becomes a better company because of it. That is, there is no company that operates completely without processes. Further, some small family business, these processes may not be written down in the form of any block schemes, but somewhere there is a clear sequence of actions that are passed from employee to employee. Let us move on. Examples of the lunch ordering process. For example, when we go to a restaurant and place an order, that is a process too. So first, for example, the customer places his order, the waiter takes it, passes it to the kitchen, the chef prepares the order, and the process ends with the delivery of the customer's dish. This is the top level, the process described. Processes can be described both in this broad manner and in more detail, explaining what happens inside. A company that describes a process gains the ability to manage it. That means it can control it, change it, and measure it. Companies often ask, what KPI can an accountant have? What KPI should we implement for the office manager? What KPI could someone else have? But the KPI should be one that measures the quality of process execution. Well, we do not know what processes are performed by the office manager, accountant, or anyone else in this particular company. Therefore, of course, you can describe standard key performance indicators for accountants because the processes that accountants perform, if gathered from all companies, will still have a limited number. But it's easy to make a mistake if, in this specific company, the processes are one thing and the key performance indicators are taken from some other company where the accountant's work processes are different. Then the system will misdirect the person, it will influence their behavior. Or even worse, it will force them to do something that's not characteristic but necessary to get a bonus. Unfortunately, this happens too. Let's move on. The next point is that business processes are operational activities that provide, produce, and deliver products and services. And every organization consists of employees who perform activities using many different resources with varying levels of control. Business processes are unlike, for example, support processes. This is the core of any organization. What are the characteristics of a process? Any process has resources that are involved in it, inputs, that is, what we have at the beginning, activities, what happens inside, and results or outputs, as well as some form of control. These are the 5 basic characteristics of processes. Now let's examine each of them in more detail. So let's solve a case study for now. We'll come back to these points later. I purposely included case studies to make it more interesting for you and to get you thinking. Once Colgate reached its sales limit. They had reached every family and hit a wall where people were already using Colgate and sales couldn't be increased further. A consultant who came to the company proposed a very interesting and original solution to increase toothpaste sales. What do you think it was? Again, I'll repeat, if you know, put a plus sign. If you don't know but have some guesses, write down how it could be. Oh, Olga mentioned a movie about McDonald's called The Founder in English. Yes, it's an awesome movie. I saw it last year, even though it's been around for many years. I even regret not seeing it a long time ago when it first came out. So who has ideas on how the company could increase sales? But again, from the perspective of process optimization, that is in some very elegant way. Valeria, I see, put a plus sign. Well, it's great to have such case studies, you know. In short, the solution was this: to increase the opening in toothpaste tubes, which was only 2 millimeters in diameter, so that people would squeeze out more. And to this day, a lot comes out of many toothpaste tubes. And there are toothpastes, it's rare when little comes out. The fact is, for brushing teeth, a pea-sized amount of paste is enough. This is considered the necessary amount of paste. But we most often squeeze out enough to cover the full brush. This is incorrect. It comes out very easily, so we consume much more toothpaste than we need to. That's how the company did it. Interestingly, many companies replicated this stunning success, but in different ways. For example, Alka-Seltzer is a hangover remedy. They started showing 2 effervescent tablets instead of 1 in their advertisements. And people, as they saw in the ads, also used 2, even though 1 was enough. Gum manufacturers also started showing in ads how someone pops 2 pieces of Orbit or Leader gum into their mouth, or 2 of these Tic Tacs, although 1 is enough. Procter & Gamble added the phrase, repeat if necessary, on shampoo bottles, and people started washing their hair more often, using shampoo more frequently. I mean, more often in one wash. As for candy bar manufacturers, I think, sometimes there are 2 in a package, 2 bars in one package. This is also a clever solution. It's to make the candy bar last for 2 servings. You eat the candy bar once, then again, because often, according to studies, people would divide a candy bar into 3 parts. The same goes for chocolate manufacturers. Previously, a chocolate bar had squares about 1.5 centimeters by 1.5. Now they're often like this. I mean, I even bought a chocolate bar recently. It's lying there in my kitchen. And I see as I break off a piece, it's already bigger, about 4 times larger. This also encourages you to break off a bigger piece. These are also very subtle ways of optimization. Now let's get back to processes. Processes have resources. These are all the things that a process must regularly have to transform incoming data, outgoing data, or inputs and outputs. Resources can be both tangible and intangible. For example, people, computers, and software are tangible, while skills and experience are intangible resources that are used. By the way, quite a lot of process optimization lies in the area of optimizing the resources used. For example, the time used to complete a task. If you optimize it, you clearly save money because people's time has a very specific cost. Next, input data are the process inputs, or inputs in English. This is what is transformed in the process into the final product or service required by the process customer. Inputs can be, again, tangible and intangible. For example, tangible ones are written data, details, forms, while intangible ones are verbal requests. Every process has an input and output. That's the flow. Next, activity or action is what happens inside the process, the actions that help us transform the input into the output. This could be measuring, sawing, nailing, drawing, writing, or again, intangible activities like reading, approving, presenting, and so on. And finally, results or outputs are what we get at the end of the process. They must meet certain requirements. I have specifications that are agreed upon in advance with the process customer, and it doesn't matter whether they are internal or external. They can also be tangible or intangible, products or consultations. These simple process components allow us to build a huge number of company processes, describe them, regulate them, measure, improve, optimize, and so on. Just these simple elements. Let's move on. Control. Process control is the activity aimed at ensuring predictability, stability, and consistency in the operation of processes at the desired level of performance with some acceptable deviations. It can be both internal and external. Internal control is usually better if possible to achieve. For example, customer specifications, legal requirements, and copyright laws are external requirements, while internal quality checks are the internal part. What's the point? The fact is that all processes consist of some combination of inputs, outputs, and actions. Moreover, these inputs, outputs, and actions can be combined in different ways and controlled differently, so it's possible to build an almost unlimited number of processes. And these processes can be regularly improved to use them most effectively. I think you also know many ways to optimize processes in your life. For example, if we want to move something, it's better to roll it than to push it. A wheel is more efficient than a square. And I'm not even talking about automation, like how it's easier to clean an apartment with a vacuum cleaner than with a broom and dustpan, or how it's more convenient to wash clothes in a washing machine than by hand, and many other such things. Let's move on. So here's another interesting case study in optimization. This case is about liquid soap. Again, if you know the solution, put a plus sign. If you don't, think about what the solution to this problem might be. Robert Taylor invented liquid soap in a dispenser in 1980. We pressed down on the dispenser. But the thing is, liquid soap was already being used in production at that time, meaning liquid soap as such already existed. These dispensers or pumps also already existed, and it was impossible to patent them. So his idea was to combine two things that were used separately. The pump itself already existed, it had been invented earlier. And he came up with the idea of combining them to make it convenient to use. So he knew that as soon as he launched his business, large companies would quickly copy it, so he found a very original solution. If you know, put a plus sign. If you don't know, don't. If you have a guess, write it down. Let's see if we have anyone here who's ready to guess. You have 30 seconds to respond. All solutions are unique, meaning there are no identical ones. The methods we're looking at today are very close to inventions. In the course, we'll be looking at more down-to-earth options, meaning you won't have to invent the airplane. Okay, so here's the correct solution. He placed a $12 million order for the production of these pumps with two companies that were manufacturing such devices at the time, and he understood that they would need a long time to fulfill his orders before they could increase production. Consequently, all those who wanted to copy this soap couldn't do so at that time because there were no manufacturers, and back then, factories and machines took a very long time to build. Nowadays, you can probably copy any production in a week, already in China, easily launching on AliExpress, but back then it took much longer. So he had 2 years to produce and sell everything he manufactured, and then his company was bought by Colgate-Palmolive. He earned 5 times more than he invested. He had to raise money to place such a large order, but he managed to do it. Next, let's talk about different types of processes. There are formal and informal processes. Business processes reflect the essence of an organization's existence and create value for the customer. Support processes support the company, and the customers of such processes are internal. By the way, companies often underestimate support processes, which is a mistake. Yes, they may not be very interesting for the end customer, but there's a lot to gain by optimizing them. And finally, there are managerial processes, which are about how the company is managed, how strategies are set, goals are defined, culture is formed, and so on. These are important processes too. These are the types of processes that are usually distinguished. Now let's talk about process optimization. This applies to all types of processes: formal, informal, business, support, and managerial. In other words, all processes in a company can be optimized. It doesn't matter what type they belong to. Here's another case study about optimization. This time it's about Yellow Pages producers. In the US, there were two major Yellow Pages producers, and consumers didn't worry much about it. They bought both directories, which were updated almost monthly. So every month both directories were purchased. They cost very little. Naturally, each company would like to beat the competitor because they understood that the situation where customers buy two directories wouldn't last forever. Obviously, only one should remain in the market. Do you have any idea how to beat the competitor? Again, you have 30 seconds. If you know the answer, put a plus sign. If you don't know the answer but are willing to come up with a solution, write down your ideas. Well, there's no solution yet? Then I'll tell you. The consultant they brought in suggested producing a smaller directory, just enough to contain the information, thicker but smaller in physical size. Since people tend to place smaller directories on top of larger ones, they started using the smaller one more frequently. Additionally, sellers began placing the smaller one on top of the larger one. As a result, only one directory was actively used, and the other quickly went bankrupt because fewer people were buying it. People noticed the difference, realized it was more convenient, and that they used it more often. Now let's discuss why it's important to optimize processes, and why it's crucial to understand that process optimization isn't just something that would be nice to do someday. The fact is, if processes are incorrect, they lead to the following consequences. Customers complain about low product quality or poor service. Colleagues get frustrated. They don't receive proper service. Information isn't sent, and requests aren't processed. Work is duplicated or not done at all. Costs increase, and resources and time are wasted, which is sometimes quite apparent. There are many bottlenecks that cause operators to miss deadlines or violate critical service level agreements. I can say that most problems and errors in a company are due to flawed processes. What is process optimization? It's improving the efficiency, effectiveness, or transparency of a process. And this applies absolutely everywhere in any company. Even if a company had perfect, optimal processes, they will degrade over time for various reasons. That's why they need to be analyzed and optimized. In other words, even if a company had everything in place, it doesn't mean changes aren't necessary. The market changes, the world changes, so this needs to be taken into account. But since business processes are typically invisible, many people don't consciously think about them and don't realize how important they are or how much impact they have. And so, when problems arise, they often try to blame someone instead of fixing the process, or they attempt to implement new technology. But this doesn't solve the problem. And only process optimization can truly solve the problem. Therefore, process optimization is an approach that uses a set of predefined structured tools. We'll be looking at these in the course. They've already been invented, along with methods and techniques that employees can use to improve their company's operational environment. Process optimization of an individual process is an action aimed at making any business process or procedure more efficient, effective, or transparent. That's the essence of process optimization in a nutshell. What are the benefits of process improvement? Typically, company costs are reduced, efficiency increases, and organizational flexibility improves, things that many companies need today. Here's another case study from the field of optimization. This was about Herbert Dow. Herbert Dow founded a company that produced potassium bromide, which was widely used in medicine and in the production of photographic films. He founded the company, kept it in the USA, and had his own technology for producing this bromide. And as he saturated the US market, he decided to enter new markets. He tried to enter the English market, but in Europe at that time there was a cartel, that is, a collusion of manufacturers, who were selling their potassium at inflated prices at 90 cents, at 49 cents. But Herbert's price was 36 cents. So his product was cheaper? In order to drive the foreigner out of their market, the cartel decided that since he was trying to enter their market, they wouldn't change anything in their own market, but they would squeeze him out of his homeland. So they would supply bromide to the US at a very low price so that he would go bankrupt in his main market, so that no one would buy from him and he would no longer venture into other markets, but would try to survive and eventually go bankrupt. So they started lowering the price significantly to 15, then 12, and even 10 cents. How could Dow's company survive? I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it before I tell you how this problem was solved. By the way, some companies later repeated this approach. He raised the price by 80 to devalue their product. I don't know how raising the price will devalue it. No, that's not it. What did he do? He decided that he would stop his own production, would buy all the competitors' bromide and sell it to Europe for 27 cents, even cheaper than he was selling his own in the US. This way, he found a place to sell this bromide, because it's clear that in the US, buying and reselling was unprofitable. You can't buy for 10 cents and sell for more because competitors are selling. But he decided to hit them where it hurts. He went to Europe, set a low price there because he didn't need to produce anything, he just needed to transport and sell, and in the end, that's how he won. Next, let's talk about the advantages of process optimization. The first advantage is increased accountability. Once the process is documented and once we start working on each of them, we create the right system that allows us to control the process and prevent negative consequences such as fraud, errors, or any losses. People start to know this process, they have it written down somewhere, and it's easier for them to work with it. Next, reliability increases. That is, processes are more often executed exactly as they should be, and there are no failures, no lost information, and other issues that sometimes occur when processes are performed chaotically. Next, compliance with regulatory requirements is simplified. In areas where business is very tightly regulated, such as pharmaceuticals or banks, in those areas, processes are carefully documented and optimized because that's the only way to ensure that we comply with all standards, all laws, all regulations, and don't deviate from them. If we don't have all of this in place, there's a high chance we'll mess up somewhere. We also avoid waste. Many companies gain a significant advantage here because their processes don't create any losses or waste, or things where the company is just spending money. This enables what's called lean manufacturing. By optimizing processes, we allow the company to significantly reduce costs. And finally, improve safety and security, which means there are no security issues for both employees and companies. So everything works as intended. There are no incidents, no threats, no thefts, no espionage, and so on. Here's another case study about optimization. This is Moscow in the early 2000s, an office where there used to be a photocopying service. A new company moves in and engages in different activities. But people still go to this office out of habit. The first thing the new company did was put up a sign saying no photocopier. It didn't help. People still came in and asked if there was a photocopier. They put up an additional sign. There wasn't one and there won't be. It still didn't help. People kept coming in and asking where they could find one. They put up another sign. We don't know where to find one. That didn't help either. What should they do? How can they stop people from coming to this new office since there's no photocopier anymore? What do you think? People kept bothering them, asking when the photocopier would be back, where else they could find one, if they could help, and so on. Point out where one can be found. By the way, that's a good solution, not a bad option. But people might still come in and ask why it's closed or if there are any other options. It's a good option. Another option the company tried was to set an insanely high price, charging thousands of rubles for a single photocopy, so that people would be shocked by the price and leave. I think some people might still be unreasonable. That's an interesting solution. Here are a few more results of process optimization, happier customers. But I think those of you who work with postal operators, for example, or with banks, which often have postal services, know how frustrating it can be with restaurants or stores. If processes aren't optimized, things constantly go wrong. If they're optimized, you get what you need like clockwork. Streamlined operations, consistent quality, less waste, lower costs, increased market share, improved communication, and higher employee morale. These are all the benefits of optimization. Now, for those taking the course, your homework is to describe processes in your company or simply actions that are performed which, in your opinion, need optimization. It doesn't have to be detailed. For each process, describe its negative impact on the company. And if you already have an idea of how it could be optimized, for example, you might not know how to implement it, but you have an idea. Share your thoughts. As for how many processes, preferably at least 5. You can describe them at a high level, like the customer service process or the financial reporting process, that kind of thing. With this, we conclude topic number 1. We've learned what process optimization is and looked at some case studies. Next, we'll study the basic concept of process improvement. We'll cover this in the next class. That is the basic terminology that people use in this field. And then all the other classes we'll have will bring us closer and closer to the topic of process optimization. Books that I can recommend? The case studies I showed today are described in the article Tricky Business at the link provided. Unfortunately, there are almost no books on this topic in Russian. I found a book. I haven't read it, but I looked at the table of contents. It's called Business Process Optimizers. It's something very close to our topic, but not exactly it. Good books on this topic are not that numerous, even worldwide. There are many books about lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, and so on, total quality management. But this is a whole science, and these books are extensive. And if we're talking about an ordinary employee, manager, or HR professional, I think this information is very complex. It's more for specialists in the field. Speaking for a general audience, the most understandable books that I managed to find after going through a huge number, I could name the books Business Process Improvement, 2 foundational books on process improvement, and a handbook that serves as a guide for process improvement. These are the most detailed ones, so there you have it. This concludes today's session. If you have any questions, you can ask them now. If there are no questions, please write down what you found most valuable. I saw Nina's answer about Xerox, to put a Xerox machine and make money. That's also an option. Give it to the office manager and set the price above average. Or just give it to Xerox. That's a good option. It's just that this thing is noisy and harmful. When the machine works a lot, it's laser-based, and it ionizes the air. It's really beneficial for me to breathe such air. Limited exposure is good, extensive exposure is bad. Well, thank you for the meeting. Yes, thank you too. Thanks to everyone who was online, who's watching and not yet enrolled in the course. I certainly invite you to join. In this course, you'll learn how to optimize business processes and view them from an improvement perspective. That's all for now. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.